All right, welcome to another special episode of the Contractor Business Builder podcast. We have the honor of hosting Rob Bruce. He is the co-founder of Contractor Foreman. How are you doing today, Rob?
Good, Derek, and just want to say hello to everybody watching. Glad
Yeah,
to be here. It's an honor.
definitely. I'm looking forward to it. The man, the myth, the legend. I've used Contractor Foreman a bunch and I really enjoy the software. So I'm looking forward to diving in. And you've got, a ton of experience that you bring to the industry. Can you tell us a bit about your background and what inspired you to co-found Contractor Foreman?
Yeah, I been in construction pretty much my whole life, one way or another. It's kind of funny. My very first job in construction, I was 12 years old and went to work for a company that redid lifted houses and redid the foundations under the homes. And they hired me because I was really small back then. I've grown a little bit, but back when I was 12 years old, I was a small little kid. And so I could crawl through the crawl spaces and dig the trenches to slide the I-beams under the home. So first 2 years of my life in construction, I crawled under houses and fought the dead cats, the dead mice, the raccoons, everything, spiders that lived under there. And because I was little and I could get it done quick, I mean, I was making pretty darn good money even at the 12, and that just really got me hooked. On really construction, and from there I just kind of worked my way up. Took a couple of different paths here and there, but it was always construction related. Built a lot of homes for some nationwide home builders. Built probably a couple of hundred homes. Dabbled in the commercial side of things. Eventually, I ended up settling in on the public works industrial side of construction. I just really enjoyed that challenge. But at the same time, I was always drawn to technology. And so I tried to stay up on technology. And as we all know, construction's way behind on technology. So I was always the guy in the company, even though I was construction manager, project manager, could lightly give me the title also if I was kind of the IT guy, because it was all green screen DOS back then.
Yeah.
Nobody knew anything about them. So it was up to me. And then as construction management systems started to become popular, I think the first one I worked on was probably 1994, maybe 1995, Timberline, which is kind of still around under a different name. But so I was always the guy that, hey, we're gonna get a construction management software, Rob. So you go out and find it and implement it, et cetera, et cetera. So I did that for a lot of years and for a number of companies. And it didn't take me long to realize they, in a way, all did the same thing, of course, with a different spin, but they all had kind of two things in common. They were all way too expensive and they were all way too hard to implement. And I knew back then they just didn't have to be. And back then I hadn't thought about starting one. I just knew that was wrong. They didn't have to cost that much. They shouldn't take 6 months to implement. Shouldn't have to hire a consultant to do it. And so it was obviously a number of years later, we really got going on Contractor Foreman in 2016. But what got me excited about it right off the bat is I learned then that we could do it for substantially less cost, because all these contractors out there, they couldn't afford $40,000, $50,000 for a construction management system. They couldn't shut down their back office for 2, 3, 6 months to get this thing implemented and pay a consultant. Back then, it was $80 an hour or whatever, paying them full time for, again, months and months on end. And so we built Contractor Foreman in a way that it was full featured, but didn't need the consultant, didn't need all these massive expenses and shutdowns in your back office. So we built it in such a way that you just roll it out by doing your day-to-day business. And I think that's really what the industry needed. I've always done a lot of teaching, coaching, mentoring, and it's always for the betterment of the construction industry, as I say.
Yeah, definitely. No, I love it. You saw an opportunity and a pain point and something that could be done better, and kind of brought what was once, more a larger, cumbersome, process, and streamlined it into software that every contractor can afford and implement in a quick way. So very cool. And then also having one thing that I've noticed about Contractor Foreman is it does feel built by contractors for contractors. You can tell that, obviously with your experience, and I'm sure others on your team, that it's not just a software solution, but it's also built with the contractor in mind, and it functions around what they would experience, on a daily basis, and with on their job sites and things like that.
There's a ton of funny stories out there about when we were getting going, and I am
Yeah.
absolutely not a programmer. I am not a programmer. Don't even let me touch anything around programming.
Yeah.
But it was so funny because I had to take my construction terminology and somehow translate that to programmers so they knew how to write it. And talk about the clash of two worlds trying to understand each other.
Yeah.
That was a challenge. But if you do take a look at it, you'll see it. It's all written in construction terminology. It's not written
Yeah.
by computer engineers.
Yeah, definitely. So for contractors, wanting to get ahead, there's always competition in the industry. There can be some pretty fierce competition. How can contractors get ahead, when with all the developments and just a lot of new players that come up in construction as well? What can they do to kind of stay ahead?
That's a huge topic, but
Yeah.
I can kind of distill it down to a few things, and we can get into whatever level of detail we kind of need to or want to here. But
Hmm.
I would say let's break it down to the field and the office or back office, whatever you want to call it. Everybody in the field has workers of generally the same experience. Every company has basically the same tools. It used to be that a contractor would get an advantage because they went out and they bought some tool that was special to their line of work that gave them a real advantage in the field so they could perform work 10% faster than the competition. That's not so true anymore because everybody has the same tools for the most part. Um, so it's really hard to get an advantage out in the field. You do have to manage your field extremely closely these days it's not to give you the get that advantage, but it's to not lose the advantage. You got to stay on top of your projects very, very tightly. So where you can make money and get ahead is what I call in the back office. You're going to put in systems in place where maybe doing residential work, and right now you can turn out 5 to 7 bids per week. And that's just maximum. That's all you can do. Well, if you get something like an estimating system or a construction management system in place, now you can bid 10 to 15 jobs per week.
Mm.
So, the
Yeah.
more you bid, the more you're going to get, right?
Yeah.
So now you're landing a few more contracts. But then when you start to manage that job, here's the way you've got to manage that from the back office. And one way to do it is I like to use this scenario, analogy, whatever you want to call it. Think about it. Your guys out in the field are turning in paper time cards. Okay. So let's say you pay weekly. They're going to turn in those time cards on Friday or something or whatever day. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Payroll, somebody in the back office is going to process that payroll. You're going to get some level of detail, probably not much back saying, well, we spent this many hours on this, and, I had a labor budget maybe of this. And if you're not doing labor budgets, you have to start like today. So just thought I'd point that out. Some people aren't. And so you find out that you've almost eaten up your labor budget. Okay. Well, by the time you find that out, because time cards got turned in on Friday for the previous week, you didn't get the data back until Wednesday. Now that data is working days, at least 10 days old, if not more. It's too late to fix it. You can't go back and fix it. Where if you've got a construction management system in place, it should have a report that is something I guess you'd call budget versus actual labor report. And it's running off of the time card. So it's a real time report. So you could go in there at noon and find out how your labor's doing for the day. And now you've got real time data. You can see you're starting to encroach. How much of my labor have I spent? What's my actual to date? And you can get in there and you can fix that issue if you're starting to go over on that labor. So you can look at that for what we call the MLESO, material, labor, equipment, sub, and other. And if you're using a solid construction management system, you can go in at any time. And the data is not old and stale and useless. You can go look at this data that's actually meaningful and allows you to take action that needs to be taken. So now your competition doesn't have that, and they're not going to be anywhere near as profitable, which isn't going to allow them to grow. And this is how you just stay that 2-3 steps ahead. Keep an eye on technology. Stay up to speed on technology. A lot of people aren't comfortable with it. Hire somebody. Get some help. It will definitely help you a lot.
Yeah, definitely some powerful functionality and, you know, processes to get into place there with knowing your real-time data for labor, for materials, for whatever you have on a project to get ahead of the ball and know where you stand on a project. Plus, it feeds back into a never-ending, you know, accuracy loop as far as knowing on your next estimate. Let's say you're halfway through a new home build, and you know I undercalculated the framing labor on this project. I'm bidding a similar house right now. I can now go to that estimate and say, well, maybe I should bump up my framing budget for labor, you know, by an extra couple days or week or hours or whatever to improve the accuracy and maintain profitability across the company. Any other parts of the kind of back end office where you see, you know, big improvements that can be made or are quite impactful for contractors?
And we talked about managing the field, but it's also managing the office. And it kind of works the same way because if you're putting the data into something somewhere anyway, whether it's QuickBooks, an Excel spreadsheet, Word document. I mean, you're doing this anyway. So why not do it in a system that is all inclusive so it feeds data to all other parts? And where I'm going with that is you're going to again get better accounting data. It's going to take whoever is doing your accounting, it's going to take them less time to do it, and it's going to be much more accurate and meaningful data. And what we're talking about here is if you take 10 construction companies and look at their profit and loss statement or something, if they're not using a construction management system or they don't have these systems in place in a back office and out in the field, phone apps and things like that for that system, you see these big peaks and valleys in that and in your profit and loss. And you don't want that because the other way that a system like this can help somebody is bonding and insurance. If you can go in and show your insurance person, your bonding person, whoever, you can show them a good WIP report, work in progress report, stand WIP. You can show them these that you're using AIA invoicing, using all these official construction reports. They're going to see that you're doing well and you know what you're doing. And believe it or not, showing the difference between showing a bonding agent a WIP report and not can be 1%, 1.5% on your bond.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're really up on your competition
Yeah.
because you're operating smoother, you're faster, your expenses are going down, your insurance is going down because with Contractor Foreman, it's got safety meetings in there. So you can show your insurance person that you're holding your safety meetings every Monday at 8 o'clock. Here's the topics. Here's the people that were on the meeting. Here's the signature of them. Here's a picture of everybody that was at the meeting. Your insurance guy loves you. You do your job hazard analysis and you can spit them out 60 job JHAs that you did, your insurance rates just went down. And if you didn't lower them, go shop your insurance. You got the wrong insurance guy. So
Yeah. Yeah, big benefits, and like you said before, a lot of this stuff you're generally already doing as a business, or that information is already somewhere. Just making it usable, having the right system in place, bringing the processes in, and having your team on board can just create a much smoother, more efficient business and provide other additional benefits, like you mentioned, with you know, saving on insurance or bonding or what have you. And I think that's often a big pain point for a lot of contractors is they're kind of doing too much and they're kind of all over the place, and that admin office work does eat up a lot of their time, and they're kind of split between the field and the admin side of things, and just have generally you know, being disorganized and taking some time to actually, like you said, stay up on technology, start utilizing proper technology to make a world of difference. And you bite the bullet at the beginning to get things set up and implemented, but it provides ongoing, you know, benefits and efficiencies long into the future.
so there's
You
a quick little
mentioned,
thing I want to throw in
yeah.
because
Mhm.
it can be a double-edged sword because you start using one of these systems and you're like, oh wow, look what I can do. Oh man, oh man, I only have 10 cost codes right now, but if I have a system like this, I can create 150 cost codes and I can do this and you just
Mhm.
get too much detail and it just one of the best things somebody ever taught me, a mentor I had back in the 90s. He used to pound this into my head. I was first job as a project manager doing public works. Owner of this pretty decent sized company took me under his wing. and taught me a lot. But the thing he'd probably yell this at me at least once a day. Don't get trampled by the elephants while you're watching the ants go marching by. And it took me, even though it's so simple, it took me quite a while to really figure out what that meant and think about that when you're creating, getting more organized and creating new reports and maybe new cost codes. Don't get trampled by the elephants while you're watching the ants go marching by, because you'll end up with so much data that it's actually meaningless and it's inactionable because it's at such micro level that you're
Yep.
just stuck. You're like, what do I do with that? So
Mhm.
you got to find that balance. And again, don't be afraid. It'll pay off. It's a wonderful investment. Go get help if you need help setting something like that up.
Mhm.
Lots of
Yeah,
people out
definitely.
there know how to do it. That's what Derek's for.
Yeah, definitely. That's what we do. We help contractors navigate that world of software, and that is often something where it can get overwhelming if you're trying to do too much too fast, especially when you get like a new software in place. There's all these features and things that you can start doing, and you kind of start one thing and then another thing, and you never kind of finish the first thing, and it can get a little bit messy. So prioritize, pick an area where you want to improve. It could be estimating, that could be your back office, that could be job reporting, whatever it may be, and kind of get that up and running and implemented. I know a common problem that we can run into as well is we'll set up a system, we've got a process, we've got a software, and it works, but then we kind of move on to the next thing without actually implementing it in the field and making sure that whoever is responsible for operating the system actually understands it and it's working, because there's often a process with implementation. It's one thing to have it set up and functioning. It's another to actually have it being used by personnel and beneficial. So
Big,
definitely you don't want to rush it, and staying focused is definitely a benefit in this case.
big thing you just brought up. I hadn't really thought about it. I mean, I bring it up to other companies quite often, but what we were talking about here, beware of something when you're going to go out there and look for a system to use. Bring your whole team into the decision. I can tell you that the odds of it backfiring on you, if it is not a team decision, a company decision, and everybody gets input, we find that happening all the time, and people will just refuse to use it, especially if they're not comfortable with technology. People in the
Yeah.
office think, oh, you got that because now I'm going to get replaced by technology. So I'm going to do all this work and then you're going to lay me off because you don't need me anymore. That's what goes through their head.
Yeah.
People out in the field are like, I'm not putting that app on my phone. You're going to track me and know everywhere I
Mhm.
am 24/7 and things. And no, the system doesn't work that way. It cannot track them 24/7. That's highly illegal. We'd
Mhm.
never do that. But you're going to get pushback if you don't get company wide buy in on the system. And if you do bring them in, then they're excited about it. They love the change. They love the challenge. They love the new future that's out there to do well in their job. Everybody wants to do well in their job.
Yeah, terrific point. You definitely want to involve your employees, your stakeholders, whoever it may be, in the decision process, and as well as just in the implementation process. Make sure you're asking for feedback. Let them know that their thoughts on the are welcome, and that they're part of that process of implementation. And then always explain the why behind it. Why are you implementing this? What's the benefits to them? Obviously it may benefit you and the company more, but there are benefits that would translate to employees as well for using the different software and systems and things like that. Jumping over to estimating, because I think estimating is another pain point for a lot of contractors out there, just the amount of time that they need to spend on estimates for potential clients and things like that, as well as just all the data that's involved. And what would you can you talk about estimating? I know this is a huge topic, and as well as like using takeoff software. Is it better to use takeoff software, or do the old fashioned of, just getting a set of plans in front of you and doing manual takeoffs? What are your thoughts on that?
I have two completely different schools of thought on that. And as I've done so much of this, and somebody says, should I go? So that's a big, big question. The first
Mhm.
question is, how comfortable are you with technology? Are you fairly technology proficient? Because if technology in construction is still new to you, I'm going to be hesitant to say get a takeoff system, because they're in a sense, even the best ones out there are still kind of complicated. I mean,
Yeah.
they just have to be in because of what they're what their function is. I'm not saying that you can't learn them or something, and then grow into technology and then go ahead and get that takeoff system. I've been estimating quite a while. And I tell you, there is just nothing better than sitting down with an old fashioned set of plans on paper with your stack of markers and start doing your highlighting. And the reason that I say that is on a takeoff, on screen takeoff, you've got to kind of zoom in a little bit. You can't just blow the whole plan up on one page on one screen unless you've got a 65-inch monitor, which I know people do get, and it does help if you're doing on screen. Because when you're working with the actual paper, the actual set of plans, you've just got a better visual of the whole project. I use this little story, whatever, again, another little analogy of, think of it if the project had 20 privacy trees for a privacy, 20 trees on a privacy line on it. And so on screen, you're looking at that and you're going, okay, well, I got to buy 20 trees and got to buy a little bark. Pretty simple, right? So you throw in the cost of 20 trees and a couple of yards of bark and I'm done.
Yeah.
If you're looking at that on a set of plans on paper, you're going, wait a minute. The closest access to those trees is 100 yards away. I got to move those trees 100 yards. I also got to move all that bark because we can't get a rig back there of any kind to help place the bark. So we're going to wheelbarrow all this bark over there. And maybe then you're going to pick up the border, some type of border around the tree. Where on an on-screen takeoff, you might not have it expanded enough to really get that visual. So you just, I don't know. Maybe that's just still me being old fashioned, but I've seen those mistakes being made because you're so zoomed in on a set of plans on screen.
Yeah.
And if you can do it, then buy the biggest monitor you can afford. It really will help you. But they're great tools. They're great tools because you can just set up templates of things and let it, it's not going to make a mistake on math where if you're doing a paper takeoff, you're maybe going to transpose a number or something like that and be off by whatever amount. So I really like both systems.
Yeah, I think both have their benefits, definitely, and sometimes having a real set of plans in front of you, is a little more tangible, and you can kind of visualize sort of what you're looking at. Whereas digital, like you mentioned, sometimes the finer details or things you can't see, sort of everything at once, and things like that. The benefit of digital is you often have that information saved, which you could do with like a paper set of plans as well to some degree if you're jotting notes or have your takeoff saved somewhere, but you can always go back. I know I've had this happen to me where I was estimating a project and I forgot to add the drywall for the ceiling in, which made our drywall takeoff a little light to say the least. But at the time, we did this project as maybe, I don't know, 6-7 months later. I didn't really remember how I'd done my drywall takeoff. But because we were using at the time some like a digital takeoff solution, I was able to see, oh yeah, I missed the ceiling takeoff because everything was all digital and had been saved and things like that. So there are some benefits that way.
I got to share a quick story. The worst mistake I've ever made, and this is on thankfully a very large project. I won't tell you how I did it. Take too long to explain it, but I completely dropped out a $250,000 electrical contract out of the budget. Wow. We were just short 250. Had to call the CEO and tell him.
Yeah.
What else do you do? I just, he was in a different city, so I didn't have to do it face to face, but had to pick up the phone and make that call and just say, hey boss, sorry, here's what I screwed up today.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are never fun conversations, but you just got to bite the bullet and, put the press call on your phone and deal with it and just get out in the open and take it from there.
And my point there is mistakes happen. Don't worry about it. You'll fix it. You'll get over it. It'll be history and it'll be a very good learning lesson in a number of ways. I'm still alive. So
yeah, definitely. Life carries on. On the topic of mistakes, what are some common or mistakes that you see contractors making when they're trying to build out systems or implement technology in their business?
The biggest one is I think it's the biggest one. It's one we just talked about a bit ago, is not getting the entire team's buy-in.
Yep.
I can tell you, we have customers that have had to bail on our software. The owner absolutely loves it. He wanted it. He saw the benefit, thought it was a great deal, all that good stuff. But
Yep.
he just sprung it on his crews and office one Monday morning, and
Mm-hmm.
just they refused. The other one is not planning out the implementation and onboarding. Just touch base really quickly on the difference between onboarding and implementation. I mean, Freddie, you, Derek, you know it, it's secondhand nature. I know it's secondhand nature, but a lot of people don't quite understand the difference. And there are two different things. So onboarding is getting everything, little things like your just your company data into the system. It's getting it set up, ready to use. It's going through getting the settings set the way that you want them. Then you're going to go from that step into the implementation. And so
Mm-hmm.
really plan out the implementation of that software of, like you say, where are you going to start using it first? Are you really going to focus on estimating or project management? Well, if you're going to start in project management, that's fine, but you got to get some information into the system so project management has something to work with.
Mm-hmm.
Briefly, and you want to look for things like this in software with Contractor Foreman. When you do an estimate and it's approved, Contractor Foreman takes all that data, think about all the data that you've got in there for an estimate, and it creates your project. It just doesn't create a few fields. It creates all of your job costing reports, your budgets for your MLESO, material, labor, equipment, sub, and other. Like I say,
Mm-hmm.
your job costing reports, your accounting, all that is just set up. It just spreads that data throughout the whole system. And that's what I mean by, if you're going to start in project management, you got to get, and I don't care what system it is, you got to get some data into that system. So plan that out. Where are we going to start? Are we going to start with estimating? It's always kind of the easiest because starting with a blank
Mm-hmm.
slate there. But if it takes you 2 weeks to plan out your implementation, take the 2 weeks. If you
Mm-hmm.
just go at it hither skither and just jump in and everybody starts using a piece of it that they like, you're
Mm-hmm.
really not going to go anywhere, and you're going to have a less than well built construction management software.
Yeah.
So planning is the key.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you could liken it to, planning to build a house or